All right, folks, it is definitely on Tuesday. Well, actually, yes, Tuesday on the 12th of December. So the 12th day of the 12th month. And of course, there's a lot of things going on in the world. So I'll be talking about them, seeing who else pops in, and having conversations about the various things going on in the world as well. Yemen's rebels, the Houthis, have hit a Norwegian tanker with missiles. And that is one of the news items that I'm seeing, and all along those lines. So that is definitely something that is going on in the world, and they are definitely claiming responsibility for striking the Norwegian tanker Strand in their latest attack, that being the Houthis from Yemen. And there's definitely some conversations going on with Britain as well, as they are warning the UK to stay away from Yemen's coast. And then over there in the UK, Sunak is facing um, crunch in the UK parliamentary showdown over the Rwanda asylum plan. So that is something that we're seeing going on as well. And their Public Accounts Committee questions the secrecy of the Rwanda payment. So definitely Rishi Sunak is to defuse the Tory revolt over the Rwanda bill. And over there in Japan, the Japan court has convicted a former soldier in a landmark sexual assault case that apparently gripped that nation and all along those lines. And Myanmar has become the world's biggest producer of opium, and that's actually overtaken Afghanistan. So Myanmar has overtaken Afghanistan as the top opium producer, and that is something that I'm sure that with the opium epidemic around the world, and definitely even the folks concerned about it here in the United States, people will be paying attention to that as well. And sometimes different countries like different forms of money, and apparently Argentina really loves the dollar. So Argentina dollar-loving president Javier Milei is warning nations of drastic measures to save his economy. So it definitely sounds like there are some people that saying that Argentinians are gambling everything on anarcho-capitalist and things along those lines. So definitely you can sometimes mix various political styles together as well. And over there in Israel, Israel is taking the fight against Hamas to those vast tunnel networks and all along that kind of way. Israeli military is saying that they have video that shows weapons inside a mosque in Gaza, and definitely that is something that is going on. And IDF has found more Hamas weapons in Gaza homes. So definitely it does look like that is definitely continuing as well. And in Pakistan, 23 soldiers were killed in an attack on an army base. So that is something that is going on in that part of the world. And apparently there is anger and frustration as the COP28 drafted text, and apparently the text omitted the fossil fuel phase out that some people wanted, and all along those lines. So definitely the Greens are erupting as fossil fuel phase out is dropped from that proposed climate deal, and all along those ways. And apparently, Alexa Navalny cannot be reached in prison over there in Russia. And a spokesman for Alexei Navalny says that the Putin critic is missing. So apparently, he's missing from that particular prison and all along those lines. So that's definitely something going on in Eastern Europe. Also in Eastern Europe, Poland's new prime minister is vowing to work to keep the world committed to definitely fighting against authoritarianism and all along those lines. So we definitely are seeing that as well. And definitely over in China, Chinese leader Xi Jinping is telling Vietnam that it is a diplomatic priority. So definitely we saw Biden court Vietnam, and now apparently China is courting Vietnam as well. So that is definitely something going on in the world that we're seeing conversations about as well. So definitely a lot of things are going on in that space, and I'm going to bring in our esteemed panel and see what they're talking about as well. I will mention that apparently, and I did not know this, but apparently the Harvard president, and she was one of those that was testifying, has ties to Duke University. So apparently, Harvard affirms that President Claudine Gay will not step down over what some people are deeming to be anti-Semitism remarks. I do know that the Penn president stepped down. I think there was one other executive from Penn that stepped down as well. And there are calls for resignation from both Harvard and MIT presidents. So they're actually calling for those presidents to step down. And I think that at least the Harvard president got some vote of support from various Harvard professors and all along those lines. But there are a number of people that are asking these individuals to step down and all in that kind of way. So definitely that is after their Senate testimony. And we do know that Liz Miguel did resign after those anti-Semitism hearings. And definitely even Al Gore, the Harvard alumni, is shocked by the what he quotes as tone deafness of university presidents at anti-Semitism hearing and all along those lines. So definitely that is something that we are seeing in the world as well. And North Carolina Governor Chris Sununu is going to be endorsing Nikki Haley. So Nikki's getting some powerful endorsements, but she is still way behind Mr. Trump. So I don't know if any of these endorsements are actually going to make a dent, but we'll find out since the New Hampshire governor says that is expected to endorse Nikki Haley for that role and all along those lines. So there's definitely some folks that are hoping to slow the Trump march to the nomination, because right now it looks like it's going to be a Trump-Biden rematch. And I understand that Biden's numbers are polling low, so it might even be a Trump victory. But we'll find out if that is the case or not, and all in that way. And Team Trump has slammed Jack Smith for appealing to the Supreme Court. So that is something else that we're seeing in terms of what's going on in that way. So there are a number of court cases that are going on because the House Speaker Mike Johnson is pursuing impeachment strategy he once said could cause irreparable damage to the country. So House Republicans are continuing with their Biden impeachment inquiry, and definitely that is something that is going on as well. So definitely some of the House members are slamming the Biden impeachment inquiry, saying that it is terrible for the American people. So definitely that will be interesting to see what goes on as well. So get ready to bring in the panel, and we'll talk about a number of things, some of these things that I got to and some that I probably didn't get to as well. So I'm going to bring in various folks, see who's in the house with me and all along those lines. So it's always good to see who's here joining us. I know that I've got Rick Rosner from the West Coast, and he's joining me and all along those lines. I've also got Sasha Starr, and I've also got Jatovi here as well. So we've got a number of folks that can talk about a number of things going on and all along those lines. I got a question because I was actually thinking about that inquiry hearing and all along those lines. And there's a term, it's sometimes called a loaded question, but sometimes I call it a trick question. It's like if you ask somebody if they beat their wife. I forgot how the exact question goes, but Jacoby knows the one that I'm talking about and all along those lines. Because
have you stopped beating your wife?
Have you stopped beating your wife? That's the one I was trying to think about and all along those lines. And it seems to me that in some ways, that's what those presidents were thrown into. It's a situation that there was really no right answer and all along those lines. I was thinking about this last night and everything. But do you think that I am right in that analysis, or is there a way that they could have got around these questions? Because as I was thinking about it, and I know that a lot of times there are political folks that are trying to gain their insights, whatever their political victory is, and it is a very serious issues of hate crimes, whether it is anti-Semitism or a number of the other hate crimes that are out there. So I'm not belittling that at all, but I am wondering about the nature of the inquiry. So
I just saw the Saturday Night Live version of it, but they should have hired a media consultant to game out how it probably would have gone and figured out answers. They just took their discourse bubble from the universities, the way you have to talk as, in the university community to in front of the House, and it didn't work.
Yeah. I think what Rick is saying is right. I mean, this goes to what we were talking about yesterday. You have to understand who you're talking to.
Right.
I mean, technically, they gave a correct answer in terms of freedom of speech is this, but they were tone deaf, which is correct, which you should unequivocally say any speaking of genocide upon anybody is wrong. and they will be punished. And that is where we are today, and where we should be, but where we are on those campuses, and that's what should have been said. However, just like Rick said, I mean, and as you point out, you're trying to toe the line of, I want to say all these great things and be this champion of free speech. I mean, heck, that's honestly the same people that are outraged about the same school presidents are championing Elon Musk, which is ironic because Elon Musk is letting all this stuff go on Twitter, and he's the champion of free speech. But again, it's just being tone deaf of the situation and being able to understand. Yes, unequivocally, you should say this. And like Rick said, they should have had somebody to run this by before they gave their answers. But yeah, they should have unequivocally said that.
Jacoby?
And then,
I think the problem is, you and I, in terms of free speech, you're either for it or against it. It's a yes or a no. Not sometimes, not for certain groups. The problem is they can't say they're for free speech because they've been censoring for years. And so what do? That's
they
the
haven't been censoring.
They have misogynist, sexist, Islamophobic, so many times against the COVID, so many things they've canceled on campus you can't say. The N-word, so many things we can go into, we're not allowed on campus. Now all of a sudden, these groups marching, genocide for the Jews, for Israel, that's okay under free speech? So if you're under free speech, all this should be fair game. But you can't say yes for them and no for those.
So just to point out, Lee, again, if they were against all this free speech, as you said, and Coulter,
then they're at least to be consistent.
Lee, hold on. Again, if you are saying they're against all this free speech, again, Ann Coulter wouldn't have been given money to speak at a college. Ben Shapiro wouldn't have been given money to speak at a college. Milo Yiannopoulos, or whatever his name is, wouldn't have been given money. All these individuals have that opportunity to say these things on campuses. The people in Charleston marched through a college. So again, all this stuff happens, and yes, the student, their presidents that have put their thumb on the scales in terms of trying to say, yes, these are the ways we want to go. This was honestly, Mark, the Sanjay Gupta thing, not the Sanjay Gupta, Fareed Zakaria thing that I talked about, that I brought up about free speech, about how we are so charged emotionally at this moment that we are attacking each other. Like, for example, conservatives begged for free speech, and yes, you just as you were saying, Lee, free speech is all this. And then when somebody uses their free speech, no, you can't say this. So
I agree with you.
It's the same thing.
So you're too young. Mark probably remembers this, and Rick and Sasha also. A number of years ago, I think it was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the Nazis wanted to march.
Skokie, Illinois.
Skokie, yeah, I stand corrected. Skokie, okay? So under free speech, do you allow them or not? People, if you're for free speech, you have to allow them, okay? So people like me, you have to allow them. I think they're disgusting, they're toxic, what have you. But my hands are tied. I believe in free speech.
And Lee, along those same lines, and I think hold on a second, and Lee, along those same lines, I think Jacoby will remember this. I want to say it was definitely before the COVID period and everything, but there was a march of a lot of people that would be considered liberal, or some people have learned the term progressive, or whatever you want to use for those that are a little bit on the left side or left to center and everything. And that was actually in downtown. And part of that protest, as you remember, Jacoby, was because there was rumors of what you just said, which was that the Nazis and some of the pro-right people were going to be marching through this very liberal town, because Durham's a very liberal town, and it was literally downtown, the counter protest that was going on. And it was, I think that I heard later that protest did take place, but it was off to the outskirts of the town, and it was a very small crowd, where there was a big crowd downtown that was organizing the protest against.
Lee, Charleston was a legal protest. They got papers. the what's that group? The Proud Boys legally can protest. They actually fill out paperwork and protest. The Klan still marches. So
I know that.
things are
I think it's
discussed
toxic.
and
I
they
think that
happen still.
you have to let them do it as long as it's not a call for violence. The problem with genocide,
The
that's a
Klan
call for
literally
violence.
calls for the death of black people.
Then I draw the line on that.
So all I'm
draw the
stating,
line once you threaten people. That's where I draw the
Lee,
line.
all I'm stating is, again, free speech is there. And that's what that's as Rick pointed out, they
Well,
should
it
have
hasn't been on
vetted
campus
their
for years.
answer.
People had their admissions rejected. People have been censored on campus.
But I have hold on a second. But Lee, I got a question for everybody here on the panel, and we'll get to some other issues as well. Because even Jacoby mentioned it yesterday, there is, and it's not just Duke. It's at a lot of major universities. I think there's one at Harvard. I'm pretty sure there's one in Princeton. But there are these walls of communications, and I can tell you, even at the Duke wall, that there are some words that are put on there, and they write them. Who knows when they write them? It's probably like at 2:00 in the morning, and some of those words can be very hateful. They can use the words like the N word. They can use the words that is similar to a wafer that white people don't necessarily like and everything, but it begins with C, and it's a very derogatory term toward Europeans and everything. And they can sometimes even call out what you're saying, Lee, some hateful things like death to this person or death to that person. But one, you never know who's writing it because there are these walls of freedom. So a lot of times there's not even known who is writing this. So I don't know how you would monitor that. One of the things that I have a photo picture on my camera phone, and maybe I showed on one of these future episodes, but there was a on like a bus terminal, there was a wall that was very pro-Palestine, and there was some very hateful things being said about the Israelis on that particular post, and that's on a public domain. I mean, and there were several of them that were posted that I've seen, but I don't know. One, I don't know that the police know who put them up there, and two, I mean, they stayed up there for a while. They might even still be up there now for all I know and everything. But how would you govern that? Because that is things that we don't even know when they come up, and how to, not allow that as part of free speech is what I'm asking. How would you govern that?
I mean, most students, most people on campus, most people in general just find this just something to ignore. When I was on campus a zillion years ago, there was the Lunatics Corner, the public square behind the student union, where all these a-holes and crazy people would come to shout at everybody, and then you just, you walked by them and didn't give a crap because it was just noisy junk.
Yeah, I hear you. Definitely.
I mean,
I'll tell you, of the various words, I most miss the R word. I found the R word very useful, and I'm sad we can't use that anymore.
The R word, you lost me.
The racist
for somebody who's mentally handicapped.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, like, for example, in terms of these free speech walls, things pop up on these things, from hate speech to, any type of hate speech, from swastikas to racist terminology, nooses. I mean, all these things pop up on these free speech walls. And they've been pointed out, like Cal Poly just last year had this whole, article about it. And I'll put it in the chat, where this is just talking about just the swastikas that pop up on Cal Poly's thing. I put it in the wrong chat. I put it in the main post, but yeah. Mm-hmm. So you have these things that will pop up, and they don't truthfully, they get painted over from, the swastikas to the hate speech towards the racism and so on and so forth. But it pops up. They are used. That's what those free speech walls are for, and it sucks. But just
why does it suck? Why should people not be allowed to put whatever they want as long as they're not calling for violence?
Doesn't it come down to that? The rule I always heard, and like I said, part of this is my own education. Everything was that kind of like, pretty much everything is game as long as you're not yelling fire in a crowded theater and all along those lines. That's kind of like one of those rules that everything's pretty much game as long as you're not doing that, because that is a threat, an imminent threat to everybody.
No, I understand, but if you yell and kill the blank, whatever group fill in the blank, that's an imminent threat. Genocide is an imminent threat.
again, I am against any form of hate speech, be it even talking.
How do you
Putting up
define
the
hate
squat.
speech then, Jacoby? How
Huh?
do you define it? How do you define hate speech? I think you're fat. Is that hate speech?
No.
Why? So a person who's fat would say, yes, it is. Person who's bald, I hate bald people. I'm offended. That's hate speech. It's hateful. I mean,
No.
where do we draw the line?
It's actually clearly defined.
But to even leave
I haven't
to
seen it.
hold on a
It's
second,
not
to
clearly
even
enlightened
But
me.
it's not clearly defined in the minds of people. You can come up with a definition.
But
It's not
that's the
clearly
thing.
defined in the mind of people. And I can tell you, in my personal experience through life, okay, Rick was very surprised when I said to Rick that I didn't know that he was Jewish until he told me that, right? I had no idea. And he said, well, but the way I look and something you said about your hair. And I said, look, I haven't really known very many Jewish people in Australia because it's not a big population. I don't know. And I haven't really cared. I've never really asked, right? But, and Sasha, I had no idea was Jewish. Until he told me. I had no idea until that was expressed on air. I would have never mentioned it. But can I tell you what I think they would find offensive? And I'm putting words in their mouths. So Rick and Sasha, I'd love for you to respond to what I'm about to say. But I don't think, other than expressing my condolences about what's happening and my support for you guys, other than that, I don't think I've treated you guys any differently than what I treated you before. And I think if I were to start treating you differently, if I was to start like, I better not say certain things and start acting like really, around you guys, I would think that would be more offensive to you than if I make a faux pas and say something that might be offensive that I didn't realize was offensive or something, right? I think it would be more offensive to you if I was so scared to show you who I am and just to be me around you because of who you are. And that's how I feel in reverse. If you want to tell a joke about Indians, I tell more jokes about Indians than anyone else, right? If you want to tell a joke about Indians or you want to make fun of me or make fun of Australians or whatever, I'm normally going to laugh along. And even if I don't really like the joke too much, I'm kind of going to go with it, right? Because I would rather that than you falling over yourself trying to not offend me or to feel like, if I say the wrong thing, I'm going to get cancelled for hate speech. So that's how I treat people. I treat people as like, I legitimately don't care what your ethnicity is, your sexuality, your gender, whatever. I'm just going to treat you like another person. If I have offended you, tell me. But otherwise, I'm just going to act like me around you. And I think it's more offensive if I don't. And I'd love to have your response to that, Rick and Sasha.
I know excellent Irish joke. In time, I'll tell you, it's fantastic.
That's
But
good.
you don't
But
have
even
any
along, but
Irish
even along,
joke here.
but Sasha,
Rick,
even along
what
those
do you
lines, I
think
do want
first?
to
Well,
go
hang on.
Rick.
I asked Rick and Sasha a question.
go.
Let Rick respond.
Rick, go ahead.
For one thing, I'd never expect you to be like weirdly deferential after finding out I was Jewish, because you're a reasonable, funny guy, and you wouldn't constrain yourself to be strangely proper, which we wouldn't want anyway. And then when you said about talking about Indian, I was trying to in America the person that was held up as offending Indians is Apu Nahasapatapilan, who's the owner of the convenience store on The Simpsons. And I believe that character got canceled because there was a character who's been around for 30 years now. I think has left the series, I guess, because he's Indian, and some people thought he was an offensive characterization.
But I want to come back to something that actually you and Toby were saying. Well, a couple of things. One is that I have actually need to get in touch with them because we lost touch for a minute there, but a former very close friend that can be a close friend again that is of German descent. And she sometimes would joke about the notion of having what she called a Viking afro or a Viking hairdo, because their hair can frizz out like a African-American afro sometimes. And some people, to your point, Shaquille, might find that offensive, but she saw it as a part of her joking around, and she has a number of friends of different cultures and all along.
Why is having frizzy hair offensive? I was speaking to a friend of mine in Chicago, Democrat, BLM supporter, black woman. I met her in London, and I said to her, we're very good friends. We don't agree politically, but we're really good friends. And I said to her, hey, like, what's the go with all these things? Like, you know, I can't give a black girl or a mixed race girl a compliment on her hair because to me, you know, African American, especially mixed race hair, is just gorgeous. It can be curly, it can be straight. They can do so much stuff with it, you know. And when it comes to girls, I'm into hair. So, and she went, "You wouldn't give a girl a compliment because of her hair because what you?" And I'm like, "Well, because then I'm, you know, I'm appropriating the culture or something." And she's like, "Trust me, if you think someone's got really nice hair, tell them that."
Yeah,
But this is the sort of thing that people are tripping over each other or tripping over themselves because of political correctness in a way that I think takes the romance out of life, right? We will sometimes say things that the other person takes the wrong way, but it's not generally. Most people don't say things with the intention to hurt the other person. That's just not what generally happens.
Well,
And
Jacoby,
that's where-
hold on a second, Jacoby, you had a point, but I want to come back to something else that I might actually be pushing back at you a little bit, Jacoby, because I have friends that are in the heavier set, and while it is not the same as racism, there are some people that can take some serious offense at what is called fat shaming or some of the other things that go on into that space. So even to your point, Lee, there are some people that just
Well,
like the race
well, suck
that
it.
take
So
offense
there-
at
I
some
would
of the-
ordinarily say
So
suck it up, but maybe suck it in, not suck it up is the solution to that problem.
So fat shaming, ageism, and honestly, Shaq, when you ended your comment before saying, you know, you're not saying it, or well, people aren't intentionally saying it to harm individuals, and that's where the cognizant of who you are around and understanding who's talking and who you're talking to comes into play, because as we've talked about, there are words that we would say in a group here if we were offline, but not online, because there are things we can't say online that would offend others that may be viewing and may joke that we would see as a joke with just all six of us. It's the same thing when nurses or doctors or police officers or firemen or anybody in any particular position that they are working can say jokes and relate to other individuals. There are officers that will laugh about situations that we would find truly
That is a ridiculous analogy. That is an absolutely absurd analogy, Jatavi. That's like saying military.
You understand what my analogy is, though.
That's like military people might laugh at a dead body, right? Because that's their coping mechanism. That's totally different. What
No,
I'm
but
trying
that
to
is the
impart to
same
you-
thing.
what
It is
I'm
the
trying
same
to-
exact
what
thing. The
I'm
reason
trying to
it is the
impart to
same
you-
thing is because of the fact
No,
that they
because
can relate.
a coping mechanism versus somebody being offended by something and not wanting to say it are two different things. What I'm trying to suggest to you is
So
when I
again,
go, let me respond to you. When I go to New York City, okay, I think New York City is an incredible, amazing city. I really do. Okay, I don't think it's a particularly pretty city. To me, the buildings are, you know, a lot of the buildings are made out of brick, and it's sort of very monotone, and it doesn't really do it for me. But the vibrancy and how many people there are and how exciting it is and how much stuff is going on in New York is exciting. Would I want to live there? Maybe for a year or two, but I don't think I'd be happy if I had to live in New York for the rest of my life. Just hold up a second. Now, Lee lives in New York. I met Lee when I was in New York. He came to a hotel that was near the United Nations when I was there. If I said to Lee, you know, this is a fascinating city, but I'm not sure that I can live here. There's too many people. I come from semi-rural Western Australia. I'm not sure that I could really live here and kind of be happy because I'm used to wide open fields. I would expect Lee to go, yeah, fair enough, okay, you know, like enjoy it while you can and go back to the wide open fields that you're used to. What I wouldn't expect Lee to do is to go, oh, what? You don't like the look of our city? I am so offended. Well, fuck you. I'd be shocked if Lee did that because I'm not having a go at New York. I'm not saying that New York's not a nice place. It's just not quite for me. In the same way, Jatovi, that a size 38 woman is not quite for me, right?
Yeah.
It's not that I don't think that she's a worthy person. It's not that I hate her.
Again,
It's
you
just that I
missed my
think I would
complete.
prefer the
What you've
size 10.
said, it doesn't relate to what I've said. What,
No,
what-
hold on a
what
second,
you're talking
Shaquille
about-
and Jacoby. Hold on a second, just 1 second, because I'm going to come back to something you said, Shaquille, and just really quickly. And Jacoby may agree, might not. I did see your hand, Rick, and everything, but there is this notion of when you go to a university. I actually went, and I've said on this show several times, I went to Milwaukee to go to college and everything, and I also went down to South Florida to work at a newspaper job. I can tell you that in both of those jobs, and Lee, you can relate because you've been to different places. You came from the South. That I had what they term as culture shock, because it is a different culture moving to the Midwest from the Southeast, which is where I'm
Mark,
originally
100%.
from.
When I came to
And I
USC
also
the first time,
the same thing when I moved to, and it was only a brief job. I was down there for like 6 months at a daily newspaper, but South Florida, which is a very unique place in Florida, because as far as I'm concerned, Florida is really 5 states in one, because they got different. And I know people say the same thing about North Carolina, but South Florida has a very unique culture. And both places, it took me a minute to adjust, and there was even some jokes about that adjustment. So yes, culture shock is also part of this conversation as well. Would you agree with me, Lee? Because definitely people do have
100%.
culture shock.
Oh, I've got a response to you, but let's go to
But
Rick
again,
first.
I'm going to Rick first.
So I just wanted to say that the fun thing about fat shaming is it's the only category that isn't legally protected. You can get in legal trouble at work if you say get your gay ass over here, get your Jew ass over here. But if you say get your fat ass over here, it's not legally protected.
Rick, if I said to you, hey, listen, I need a writer to help me out. I'm writing a comedy skit, right? And I said to you, not anybody else, I said to you, Rick, get your Jew ass over here. Would you be upset, do you think? Or would you go, all right, Shaq, yeah, I'm coming? Because
No,
you know the context, right? But here's the thing about being overweight, because I think I am probably the most overweight person on here, okay?
I haven't noticed.
I don't want to be like told every day, Shaq, you're a fat prick, you get on the treadmill. I don't want to be told that. I get told that all the time. You know by who? Not by my friends, by my family. Shaq, you're putting on a bit. Now, I've got a family member who's fatter than me, and I give him a hard time. But let me tell you something. Am I embarrassed or ashamed about being fat? Well, I would like to have a better looking body, but let me tell you something. This body was very expensive, okay? The amount of money I spent on booze and cocktails and nightclubs and having a great time, right? This body was really expensive. And what I can honestly tell you, other than some 40-year-old stick insect, is that I had a really, really bloody good time getting this physique. Okay, I used to have a 6-pack. I used to be, pretty fit getting into my early 20s. And then I went and had an absolute blast for the last 20 years. And I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, well, no, I had a good time. This is the result of it. I should, as I'm getting older, do something about it. But please don't patronize me and say to me, oh, you are just as beautiful as you were when you were 30 kilos lighter. No, I'm not. Right? I'm fat. That's just the reality.
Rick, the question
just really quickly, and then I wanted to get to another issue, but Jacoby really quickly.
The question that Shaq just asked you, if he were to say that to you, you wouldn't be offended. But if somebody
I worked in a comedy writer's office, and
somebody on the street told you the same thing, would that make you aware of something different than if Shaq said it, because you know Shaq?
Yeah, it would. Like,
that's my whole
on
point.
Twitter, Twitter's gotten really nasty.
That's the whole point of this whole conversation, is the fact that we can say things when we know the people or know the people that we're talking with. When we do not know those individuals, some people, because we don't know them, are going to take things a different way. So we have to be cognizant of how we talk to other individuals.
No,
that's
we
the
don't
whole
need to
point of
be,
this
we don't need to be
conversation.
cognizant of it. Jacoby, that's my whole point. We shouldn't have to be cognizant of it. What I think
No,
is
we
better
should.
is for us to say it, and then if the person says,
You just
"You know
literally
what, I have a
said-
problem with what you just said," then you can change your
You
behavior.
literally
You shouldn't
just
change
said-
your behavior because of the possibility that
You
you might upset
literally-
someone.
So then you literally just said that you don't want to say things to offend. Well, you don't intentionally want to say things to offend people. You literally asked Rick if you would call him that in the middle of the street, would he be mad? If you did that
I
to
didn't say
a
that.
random individual, well, you just asked him if you asked him to come over and do that, would he be mad? He said no. So if you did that to a random individual that you did not know, they would be pissed because they don't know you. They don't know you like that. So you would be cognizant. I don't know what you're arguing.
But Jacoby, here's the thing. Here's the thing. You Americans, I love the way you guys carry on,
You
right?
did the same thing just
because
yesterday on
when-
the show. Why are you arguing as a simple fact of life that you even adhere to?
You finished?
You don't want me to say things about you because you have people watching. So
Have
it's
you-
the same thing.
Okay, can I
Okay,
respond?
so
Sorry,
No,
hang
hold
on.
on, let me
Can I
respond
Because
here.
he just
Yes.
interjected as I was responding.
Yeah.
You Americans do this all the time. You act as though you have the monopoly on being
No.
offended, right? I didn't say you personally, Joe. I said Americans. Okay, when Americans go around the world, they can say things that are completely ridiculous. Was it JFK that went into Germany and when what he said was he tried to say something in German and when it was actually
We all
translated
understand the
properly-
stereotype
Can I
of
finish,
Americans
please?
being the arrogant
Can I
assholes.
finish?
We all
Can I
understand
finish?
that.
Can I finish? I didn't say Americans were assholes, so let me
No,
finish.
we understand that
No,
stereotype.
you
is
might
there,
understand
and
that,
there's
but let
reason
me
for
finish,
it.
please.
Let him finish his point.
Right. So JFK had said something when he was in Germany, and he got his words wrong. And essentially, what he had told the Germans was that he and all Americans are sausages. Now, clearly, that's not what he meant to say. He was trying to say that they were, I think it was Frankfurt. He was trying to say that they support Frankfurt, but instead he had basically said we're all sausages or we're all hot dogs or something, right? Not what he intended. But there's things like that where there's a mistranslation. There's things like that where there's a cultural thing that has gone wrong. Mark earlier said, "Oh, it's been a minute since I've done such a thing." Now, I remember one time when I was in North Carolina, of all places, then somebody said that to me. I said, "How are you going to be?" "I'll just be a minute." "Oh, I might be a minute." So I waited there for hours going, "What the fuck?" Right, I thought you said you're going to be a minute. Did he do that to offend me or to upset me? No, there's cultural differences. What I'm trying to impart to you is that Americans seem to think that if they're offended by something, everybody else should have known better, and everybody else should tiptoe and walk on eggshells in order not to offend somebody. And what I'm saying to you is, I don't think that's healthy. I think people should just express what they want to express. And if you've offended somebody or said something that you shouldn't have said or said something that you didn't understand would be taken the wrong way by somebody else, if you respect that person or that group, change your behavior. Okay? But I don't think you should be tiptoeing around everything all the time. I think that's ridiculous.
So you
Rick.
agree with me?
No, I don't agree with you. Rick.
Rick,
So the thing about being called stuff, I don't tell my wife everything that happens on Twitter because she perceives it as a threat. And the thing about hate speech is the implied threat. We have various like clubs and stabby things next to our front door, and lately we've been talking about getting a gun, which we decided we're not at the gun point yet, but the discourse is heated up here. And what's disquieting is the percentage of Americans who appear to believe who are more vocal in believing loony and often hateful things because of social media.
well, speaking of
Because social media is a much more effective way to yell at people than having a Nazi rally in Skokie, Illinois. Social
ask you a
media
question
can
here,
yell
Rick?
at you all day.
Let me ask you a question on this. This is not my feeling because I've been quite successful in the banking sector, but let me just put a proposition to you. Let's say that I applied for a job with a major US bank in New York and I didn't get the job. And I felt like I had really great qualifications and I didn't get the job. And I walked away from that and I said to everybody, the Jewish people, this is a stereotype, I'm stereotyping, right? Jewish people, they run the banks, they run the media industry, they run everything. And, I should have gotten that job. And I'm so disappointed. I think that just because he goes to the same synagogue as a guy who's the CEO of the bank, it's so unfair. Let's say that's my opinion, right? And let's say that because of me having that opinion, even if it's not a correct opinion, even if that's not really what happened, but that's my opinion. And I have a bit of a dislike towards Jewish people because of it. Just using this as an example. And I'm using this as an example because I come from a Muslim family that got a lot of this after September 11. Does a person having that opinion make them actually at risk of attacking that group? Or is it just simply that they feel disaffected? This is what I think is the problem. Let's take the Palestine-Israeli conflict. I think it's well known here that I believe that what Hamas did was totally wrong. I'm not going to open up this as a debate subject. I'm just going to make the point. I think that it's perfectly possible for you to express support for Palestine having more sovereignty, as I've said on quite a few shows now, without attacking Jewish people. It's not a position that I support personally, but I've asked, well, what is the solution going to be? But instead, what we see is these groups fracturing. And because they fracture, all of a sudden it's one side versus the other, which means that if you think that Palestine maybe got the short end of the stick on these international deals, and the Jewish people on the other side of that, then all Jewish people are monolithic and all Jewish people must be horrible and evil. That's where these hate speech rules and this sort of mentality destroy society, because I think people are perfectly capable of having reasonable conversations, but that's what's not happening because of this polarization. And it's led, with all due respect to a country that I love, respect, and adore, this sort of polarization is led from the United States, and I really would try to knock it off.
Hold on a second. I'm just going from you, Jacoby, and you, Rick. But Shaquille, one of the points that you just made is something, and I've said it several times on this show. I think that in my mind, is part of the problem we have in general. And it's not just Israel, it's Palestine, it's the Arab community, it's a number of communities, even Africa, which is a very big continent, as I know you know, Shaquille, because you've traveled to that continent, to various countries there. But I think that there is this notion, even within the African-American population, that most of these groups are put in these like little silos where everybody is thinking of them as being monolithic. Even the Latin show that we do, even the Latin show that we do regularly on this network is made up of different people from different parts of Latin America. And
it's very interesting. It's very interesting, Mark, that the conservative people that come onto Pod TV, or the people that are considered to be conservative on the right, when I've not agreed with them on a political position, like abortion, when I've said I think abortion should be legal, where like gay marriage, when I've said that I think the gay marriage should be legal, when I'm the normal liberal me, right, and conservatives don't agree with me, I've never had a conservative say, well, Shaquille, you don't live here. Yet the progressives on the network have no issue at all when I agree with them, saying, okay, that's fine. But when I don't agree with them, going, well, you don't live here, so you don't know what you're talking about. And I find that a fascinating position, considering that it seems to be the progressives that want to weigh in on what should happen with Ukraine, Russia, or what should happen with Israel, Palestine. I wouldn't dare tell Sasha what should happen in Ukraine, Russia. I might, in a private conversation, say, hey, this is what I've read. You know, what do you think? This is what I'm thinking, right? But I wouldn't dictate to him what should happen. Israel, Palestine, I'm not going to dictate what the policy should actually be, because I don't know, because I don't live there. And it's so interesting, and it's the group of people that tell me that I shouldn't comment on a show that I'm invited to come into to comment on US politics, okay, because you know bugger all about the rest of the world on World Edition, okay, so we only ever talk about America. It's very interesting to me that I'm invited in when I don't agree with something. Why are you here? You don't understand America, but yet you guys want to try and weigh in on Palestine, Israel, and other world affairs. Fascinating, and I'd love to try to understand how you can hold those beliefs simultaneously.
I'm not going to speak for the two. I'm going to go speak for the individuals that have made that joke, but part of it, I think, is them being a little bit. There's a term, and Jacoby will know it as well. It's called, and definitely Rick will, because he comes from Hollywood, is sarcasm and satire. And sometimes I think
it's not. Don't palm it off somebody else. It wasn't sarcasm. I've been asked several times over several years now, and when I've pointed out it's finally stopped, I've been told several times now, you don't understand race because you're not American. You don't understand healthcare issues because you don't live here in America. You don't understand the tax issues because you're not American. And yet I've only
let
ever
me push
heard
back
that
on
from
this real
people that
quick.
are on the progressive left.
Let me push back
Never
on
heard
this
that
real
from
quick
anyone
because
else.
there are many shows where I've been called many things by you, Shaq, and we're not going to turn this into a poor Shaquille or poor
No.
Let me finish. Let me finish. Let me finish. I want to get through this fast because I want to get back to the point. Let me finish.
Let me give you
I don't
more
want to
ammunition.
hear from you. I let you talk the whole
Let me
time.
give you more
I let you
ammunition.
talk the whole time
I
and
have
get out
called
what you
you.
had to say. Now, please let me finish.
I hadn't
Let
finished.
me finish, Shaq.
Let me
And we can
just
move on
add.
to the
Let me
point
just
to where
back
we
you
were
up.
because Rick had a
Let
question
me
and
just
I
back
wanted to
you
get
up.
to the same
Tell me
thing.
if you just let me
Let
finish
me
here.
finish. You're trying to talk over me. This is not going to happen today.
If you do it all the time today, you did it to me last night.
I don't.
You did it to me
Please
last
stop.
night.
You've got to
No,
hold
you
off.
stop.
Please,
You stop.
Shaq, let
You
me
stop.
say what I have to
You
say.
stop.
You
I would
have
have already
talked.
finished. If
Then
you had just shut up, I would have already
Close your
finished.
mouth.
Now we're going to keep going like this.
Do
Mark, we're going to
whatever.
keep going like this because that's what he did to me last night. So I'm going to do it
Shaq,
back to
let
him.
me say
I'm going
what
to
I
do it
have
back
to
to him.
say.
I'm going to do it back to
have
him.
to go on mute?
Mark, I'm going to do it back to him because that's what he did to me last night.
Well, I've got a better idea. Could you actually hold on a second,
Jacoby?
Jacoby? Hold on a second, Jacoby and Shaquille, because I actually said I was going to get to another issue, and this is actually one that you just
No,
brought.
Mark, no.
I just wanted to say my one thing.
Jacoby should
I cannot
go.
even say my one thing.
But Jacoby,
Okay.
Jacoby, I'm standing up for you.
You got to blow. What you going to complain about?
Give me 10 seconds. I believe that Jacoby should go, but he made the comment that I have said many things. Absolutely. And I want to add to that. Yes, I have called him a fucking moron, a fucking idiot, a clown, somebody who's a complete imbecile. And when I said that, they weren't jokes. I meant it when I said it. So, Jacoby, you can respond to those comments to your heart's delight, my friend.
Thank you. So just to push back real quick, we're not going to turn this into a woe is Shaq, woe is me show.
I wasn't saying woe is Shaq.
There you go. You won't even let me even talk. I only got 2 seconds in and you start.
Yeah, good. That's all you deserve with your
Go on mute something. Good Lord.
I'll mute myself.
So again, all I'm saying is that just to push back and not to turn this into a woe is Shaq or woe is me show. Again, Shaq, you've told plenty of people here that you're not Australian. You even said that, you haven't been to particular areas. So we all end up doing that on occasion. Nobody in this facility, nobody on this screen right here is clean of saying, well, you aren't part of. And that is something that we all fall a trap to. So to get out of that and to get back to the point in terms of saying particular things and what we were talking about prior to this whole woe is me thing, again, being cognizant of who you're talking to is one of the biggest is the biggest thing of communication. And that's how we're able to talk to one another and move the ball down the road. And, the hate speech is well defined. And yes, fat shaming is not part of hate speech, but at some point it may turn out to be. But again, hate speech is well defined, and we try and being able to call out the hate speech is another thing that we should be able to do and point that out. Because if we just keep allowing hate speech, because again, freedom of speech is being able to say whatever you want to say without the government dictating what you can and cannot say, or being oppressed by the government telling you you cannot say it. So freedom of speech, you can say whatever you want to, but that does not mean that you have freedom of consequences of somebody being offended by or being upset by you using the N word or using the R word or being upset about something that you've said. And they have the same freedom that you have to go back at that same talking point. Let Rick go. We've dominated the conversation, Shaq. Please let Rick go.
No, I got nothing at this. Well, quick thing is.
Give me a second then, Jacoby. Sorry, Rick, did you want to go?
I'm going to let the dogs
not really. I just quickly add that, free speech is fine, is great, but when it's hijacked by bad actors like the Russian propagandists out of St. Petersburg. I don't know if you can do anything about that, but they flood social media with divisive messages. It's been shown that that they've spent $350 million over the past 10 years, which is really not much considering how effective it's been. That Russia sends divisive messages into Western democracies to get everybody pissed off at each other. I don't know what you do about that. Now, Mark.
Yeah, just to let you know that apparently there are people watching because we have somebody on LinkedIn that said they're watching.
That's very helpful. Now, I'd like to Well, and to that viewer that wrote that in, I'm sorry, but I was talked over yesterday, so I wanted to bully him the same way he does me. First of all, I don't know when I've ever said I'm not Australian. Secondly, I'm not sure what the R word is. Maybe you can put that into the private chat.
I can put it in the chat.
Yeah, because
I figured out what it is.
Because I have no idea what that even refers
Mentally
to.
handicapped.
If that's the word, I didn't know that was a swear word all of a sudden, or a curse word. Again, the oversensitivity of Americans. What can we do, right?
And just really quickly, speaking of oversensitivity, because I did say I was going to get to one other issue. I'm trying to get to 2 or 3, but
I hadn't quite finished.
Go ahead.
I'd also like to know from Lee, Sasha, and Rick whether I'm somehow doing a woe is me. I'm not trying to do a woe is me. I'm just simply trying to point out the oversensitivity of Americans. And when it's the other way around, when somebody else is feeling a certain way, they just kind of live with it. Whereas there's a certain portion of your society that just gets so upset about everything, and so everybody else can't express their views, can't say anything, are walking on eggshells all the time. Who wants to live like that?
Well, speaking of walking on eggshells, I'm going to bring up another issue. There's people walking on eggshells in some people's mind, but this is a clip about a recent Texas case. It involves women's rights and abortion.
The highest court in Texas has ruled against Kate Cox, a pregnant woman seeking an emergency abortion under the medical exception for the state's near-total abortion ban. The unanimous decision from the state Supreme Court on Monday came hours after lawyers for Cox said she would leave Texas to end her pregnancy and receive necessary care while the court considered the case. It had halted a lower court ruling that allowed the procedure after an appeal from the state's Attorney General Ken Paxton on Friday. On Monday, the top court said that Cox's doctor, Damla Carson, when seeking the lower court's authorization, quote, did not assert that Ms. Cox has a life-threatening physical condition or that, in Dr. Carson's reasonable medical judgment, an abortion is necessary because Ms. Cox has the type of condition the exception requires. The court, whose 9 justices are all Republicans, said Carson had only asserted good faith belief that the procedure was medically necessary for Cox, and that belief was not enough to qualify for the exception under the Texan ban. Cox filed for court approval to end her pregnancy after learning in late November that her fetus had a fatal condition. She was about 20 weeks pregnant then. In her lawsuit, the 31-year-old said continuing with the pregnancy would threaten her health and future fertility. She and her husband have 2 children and have said they wanted more. Cox's attorney Molly Duane at the Center for Reproductive Rights said in a statement, quote, "This ruling should enrage every Texan to their core. If Kate can't get an abortion in Texas, who can? Kate's case is proof that exceptions don't work, and it's dangerous to be pregnant in any state with an abortion ban."
So any thoughts? Are we going to have people going state to state, Rick, and everything?
So the specific birth defect, the kid has trisomy 18, which is a devastating, genetic glitch that at least a 50% chance that the baby dies in the womb. Most babies with this die within 2 weeks of being born. If it lives, it's profoundly R-worded. And will never have a normal life, will need a number of operations, just not a life you'd want a kid to have. The ruling is
so Rick,
to be obnoxious by
just one quick question to Rick. Is there any threat to the mother's life, though, if she takes the baby to term?
Well, they say, I haven't seen a specific analysis, but if you've got a dead baby in you, and there's between a 50 and a 95% chance that the baby dies before birth, you don't want to leave a dead baby in there.
That's called a stillborn.
Likely to be dead.
Once the baby dies.
Hold on a second, because surprisingly, this is an area that y'all may be surprised. Jacoby, because of his wife, might actually have some expertise because his wife is a neonatal nurse. So, Jacoby, any thoughts around this and everything? Do you have any insight? Because your wife actually is in that field, and y'all probably talk about these kind of things sometimes at home.
I mean, yeah, we've talked about some of the stuff. Yes, there's a threat to the mother's life because, especially at the time the baby, if the baby were to pass away, yes, the mortality of the mother is in question or becomes threatened due to the fact of how long you're carrying basically a dead child within you.
Why would she carry a dead baby?
That's not even what the case is about. The case is not about whether she could have an abortion of a dead child because the child's not dead. Let me just ask you a question here, Rick, and you might be surprised about the position that I have because of the question I'm asking you. But the argument that you've made about the potential for this child to only live for 2 weeks or whatever, is it your position then that a person who is pregnant with a disability in a state where abortion would otherwise be illegal, that having a child with a disability should be an exception to those rules so that they can have an abortion? Is that your position?
I'd go along with that to a certain extent, that if you're going to have a baby that is a total mess, whose life is going to be miserable because the baby's born with a tiny misshapen head with screwed up organs.
Along that thought, right? Because I think a lot about these issues, and I don't really know. I don't think it should be illegal, but I think a lot about this, right? The Republicans and the Conservatives try to kind of get around rules because originally they used to say, well, if you've been raped, that shouldn't be an exception because if you can't kill your rapist, why should you be able to kill your unborn child? Which, to be honest, makes sense if that's the position that you're going to take. If life is important no matter what, that makes sense. It's consistent with their viewpoint, right? Then they gave an exception for rape. And I asked the question when this, the Dodd case and Roe v. Wade case sort of came back up in American politics. I asked the question, if rape is an exception to the abortion rule, according to Republicans, I'm not talking about liberals, I'm talking about Democrats, Republicans. If rape is an exception and you can have an abortion where you wouldn't otherwise be legally allowed to if you've been raped, what's the standard here? Would the woman have to prove that she was raped? And if so, does she have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt? Could she be prosecuted unless she can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she was raped? So I kind of come back at you with the position of, if we believe that people with disabilities are important, but yet we're going to make an exception in places where it would otherwise be illegal to have an abortion. If we're going to make an exception and say, if the child or the unborn child has a disability, we're going to make an exception and let that child be aborted, why not allow that to happen when the child is a day old or 1 week old? So the child's 1 week old, you realize that they have a life-altering or life-threatening disability. They're not going to have a very high quality of life. Why not make the same exception and say, look, if the parents think that this child's not likely to enjoy a nice life, they should be able to euthanize the child.
That's not the way our society operates.
I know it isn't, but morally, if we're talking about morals here, if you're at the law, because laws will change, morally, to be consistent with what you've just said, wouldn't that be the same thing?
We were not consistent because, I mean, that's not the way.
Well, I'm not asking about society. I'm asking about your position here. Wouldn't you think that would be the same moral position?
I mean, you've lost the game. If your baby is reached all the way to birth and it comes out like badly messed up, you've lost your opportunity to get rid of that baby. That's just the way things work.
So Rick, we know that there are a lot of mental.
No, I'm not saying it's a consistent position, but I'm saying that's the way.
But I think it's an important point, Rick. There are a lot of physical and mental disabilities or impairments that occur at birth. Okay, I have a slightly deformed leg because of the way that my umbilical cord was wrapped around me, and I had to go into emergency surgery, right? So my question there would be, if you believe that a child who is clearly disabled at 20 weeks in the womb should be aborted, or the parent should be able to choose abortion, shouldn't a child whose umbilical cord was wrapped around their throat and they're 80% brain dead at birth, but they were born alive, and it was as a result of them being born that this occurred, shouldn't the parents, to be morally consistent with your view, be able to say, I don't think we should keep this child alive?
No, but not to be morally. I mean, because we're not morally consistent. I mean, they're in. I've heard in ancient societies, if you had a girl baby, or even recently, like in like China, you have a girl baby, you run that baby up to the mountain and just leave her, and the wolves eat her.
My question is
just for the record, the questions I asked Rick and the statements I've just made there are not my positions on abortion. I'm just asking the questions because I think this is a complicated topic.
Well, there are Indian. I'm going to say that I'm.
I just have a quick question.
Yeah,
Go ahead. My bigger question over all of that is more so, why should somebody like a court or somebody somebody in the Senate or in some governmental position be making that decision more so than the person who's actually going through it?
So one of the justices who made this decision is proud to say that he has protested in front of abortion clinics 37 times. This is a completely Republican Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. And basically their argument was that if you read the ruling, that the language wasn't strong enough on the part of the woman, of the doctors, that they didn't, that they should have said more strongly that this could screw up or endanger her life. They were dancing around. The baby's obvious. It was.
Can I just say to you, Jatovi, how proud I am of you. I think you've done an amazing job. We brought up some very nuanced points, and all you did was simplify it back down to the progressive talking point that is pushed by the progressive wing of the Democrats. It should be a woman's choice. Why should a court have any say without responding to any of the moral dilemmas?
That is the worst kind of answer you can give me.
Mentality.
It is not even, I have no progressive this or progressive that. You use that to deflect and to avoid the actual conversation. The thing is, yes, I wholeheartedly believe that it is a woman's choice. It has nothing to do with me, and I should not decide for them. Therefore, I shouldn't decide if Lee should have a vasectomy. I shouldn't decide if Lee should have whatever. I shouldn't do the same. But you are, here's the bigger question, Shaq. Shaq, here's the bigger question for you then. Do you think that you are smarter than a woman in that position?
The same points that all the progressives come up with.
Do you think that you are smarter than a woman in that position?
Let me tell you what I think, Jatovi. I think that you should take a moment to...
Do you think that you are smarter than a woman in that position?
Jatovi, I just actually advocated for a position that abortion should be legal.
I am asking you a simple question then, and you should be able to answer it. Do you think you are smarter than a woman in that position?
Jatovi, unfortunately, my friend, I am not able to give you an answer.
And the funny thing is, you just literally argued about Israel that, nobody can, why can I have a position on this? You have a position on abortion, of course. But again, my position is that it is not my decision. It should be a woman's. Do you think that a woman is not smart enough to make that decision? Do you think that a woman should have somebody make that decision for her because she's making it flippantly? Do you think that you are smarter than a woman in that position? Shaq, it's a simple yes or no.
Yeah, I've heard your question. Let me answer it my way, not your way. Okay? So, unfortunately for you, I am not able to give you an answer which is simple enough for your simple mind to comprehend, because I believe...
so you won't answer the question because you're going to go into some insult. I got you. Okay, all right. I understand. Then we have nothing to talk about because you don't even want to answer the question or have that discussion, because you have already deemed that Shaquille is smarter than women, especially because you have some experience with pregnancy especially being a single man. So okay, got you.
I don't think
It's
I
okay,
said that.
Sean. It's okay.
Let's see how.
Hey,
Look,
Jeremy,
Rick,
in all
though.
fairness,
We're done.
Samuel
See how
hurts a
interesting it is.
fetus.
I
We're
actually
done.
I support
We're
the position
done.
that you've taken. I actually support the position you've taken, but for different
Then
reasons.
why are you arguing with me?
And therefore, you have some moral compulsion only
Yeah.
because just by
Okay.
pure coincidence, like 100%
Okay.
of other things, just by pure coincidence, which is 100%
Okay, cool.
exactly what
Cool.
progressives think.
Toby and Shaquille,
That's right.
hold on really quickly, Rick, really quick point, and then I got a somewhat joke answer, and then something
All
else
right, so
as we end.
I just want to
everything.
talk
Rick,
about the larger political implications. I believe that progressives can't believe how stupid Texas has been in this case, and it seems like, while it's a horrible decision, it seems like a gift to progressives because it's likely to piss off half of the a big chunk of half of the population who don't want this draconian BS in their lives.
It may not necessarily swing the election in Texas, but it may have an effect on other states.
Right,
I have to say, there was a case that came up just after the Dodds decision came out, which was that a woman was traveling in the HOV lane, the high occupancy lane. She was pregnant, and the police pulled her over or gave her a ticket, and she said, "I'm pregnant. I've got another person inside me." Now, I don't know what's actually happened to that case. If I was American, if I was in Texas, I would have supported her case because I think if you're going to have that position, you're going to stay true to it. If you say it is a life when its heart is beating and she's pregnant with a baby whose heart is beating, she's allowed to use the HOV lane. That's absolutely reasonable. This is the thing. You've got to call out the inconsistencies, but I think there's inconsistencies for the anti-abortion people and there's inconsistencies with the pro-abortion people. And you have to call it out, like I said to you in relation to disabled fetuses, and like I say to the abortion to the Republicans generally, who say, "Well, rape's an exception." Well, what are you going to do? Prosecute a woman unless you can prove she was raped? Is that your plan? So I think you've got to call it out. These are
in some cases, yeah, the woman can get more in trouble than the rapist, depending on how things go.
Exactly. But how absurd is that? What an
quickly,
absurd situation that we would see, especially when talking about young people. Then they say we're going to make an exception for young people. Then they say we're going to make an exception for incest, and we're going to make an exception for this and that. Then they say, okay, well, under these certain circumstances, if it's life-threatening, let's go with that for a second. If it's life-threatening, the majority of people, including conservatives, will say if it's a life-threatening illness, life-threatening situation, they should be able to have the abortion. Well, whilst I think morally abortion used as a contraceptive is wrong, morally, let's talk about law, because that's what we're talking about here. Is a doctor supposed to consult with a lawyer or a court so that the legal definition of whether it's life-threatening or not is met? Is that what they're supposed to do? Otherwise, they get sued for medical malpractice. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is the thing. These issues are not as simple as what Jacoby breaks it down to, where, hey, it's a woman's choice. She's the only one that can make the decision. Neither is it as simple as what the conservatives say when they say, well, life is life. Life starts at conception, and that's all there is to it. The issues here are far more complex. And unfortunately, the political system in the United States and elsewhere around the world has tried to break it down to these simple talking points and ignore everything in the middle. I think that's very disappointing.
Sure.
Lee, you've got the last word before we go to another show.
Yeah, I didn't understand fully what the emergency was for the mother's health at that point in time. I don't think they said. I understand the situation, what you said, Rick, in terms of the baby and the prognosis of the baby. That I get. That's my own point. And either it's a life or it's not. And what I don't understand is for those who say it's up to the mother, then why should we as taxpayers have to pay for those mothers who want to keep the baby if it's not a life? Either it is or it isn't. I'm very black and white. You can't pick and choose as a society whether it's a life or not.
Okay. But you can pick and choose what you're going to allow families and women to be able to do in relation to that life.
But once you allow them to choose whether they can abort a baby or not, then you're saying it's not a life. Otherwise, that's murder. And
well, you can make that argument. You can make that argument, Lee. But then, if somebody says, "Hey, look, I've just been diagnosed with terminal cancer and I have 1 month to live," I've got 2 weeks of reasonable time, and the next 2 weeks after that is just going to be full of pain and there's no possibility of me surviving, I would prefer to be able to have the warmth of a massive morphine overdose in hospital with my family around me and have that be my final breath rather than have to go through those next 2 weeks. Is that suicide? Or my family that authorizes that, is that murder? Is life and it doesn't matter? I mean, we don't treat our cats and dogs that way. If you do feel that a person should have to survive until they naturally breathe their final breath, and I don't agree, should you be able to, because of your morality, insist that I and my family don't let me die?
Are you talking about euthanasia where a person... Just a real quick, you reckon you know?
Yeah, well, I'm drawing the correlation. I'm drawing the connection between.
Let me say quick one. So here's one more thing. We're arguing about whether this baby, deserves a shot at life, being all messed up, while the U.S. is supporting Israel, which has in the past couple months, air bombarded Gaza to the tune of about 7,500 dead Palestinian kids.
You can't compare the two, Rick, and we can talk about this on another show. I cannot compare the two.
Yeah, but there's all sorts of issues there, Rick, which I think goes outside of the abortion debate, but in relation to just morality. Jewish people, as a sort of rule, don't tend to be organ donors. So the biggest group of people that require organ donations that are behind on the organs that are available are Jewish people in Israel, right? So
I didn't know that, but okay.
Yeah, that's
I didn't know that either. Where'd you get that from?
That's a statistic. But should we then pass some moral judgment there, or should we say, well, we're going to try to rectify that by doing this or that? There's all sorts of different issues. As I said, these issues become very complicated. I think with abortion, the issues become very complicated. And believe it or not, I'm just going to slightly agree with what Jacoby said there. I don't think that the legislature is a very good mechanism for being able to reflect the reality that is facing many families in this position. And I think that we can talk about extremes and we could talk about norms, but if we take a hard view on either, which is either abortion is totally legal under all circumstances, including partial birth abortions, or abortion is absolutely not legal under any circumstances, no matter what the situation, I think we run into the risk of legislating something where each situation can be far more complicated.
Yeah, I agree with that. And what's infuriating, one more thing that's infuriating about the Texas case to liberals is that the guy who brought the suit, Attorney General Ken Paxton, seems to be very immoral and corrupt. It's been proven that he was having an affair, extramarital affair, and that he bribed various people to facilitate the affair. Also, he's up on securities fraud charges, and people and liberals hate that this guy who himself is highly immoral is deciding other people's moral decisions.
Well, that's assuming that being faithful is moral and not being faithful is immoral. But
right, but I mean, he just seems like an a-hole.
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question here, Rick. Let's say that that I am married and I have an affair with a girl. She's pregnant. She doesn't want to have the child out of wedlock. I believe that she should have the child. There is absolutely nothing wrong with the kid, and the kid is viable. So I say, well, all right, if you want to abort the child because it's your body, I am suggesting that you give premature birth to that baby, and the baby, if it can survive, is great. It can survive, and if it doesn't survive, no problems, right? It's your body. You just want the baby out of you. Shouldn't I be able to insist that we try to take the baby out of you whilst keeping it alive instead of killing it before we take it out of you? Shouldn't I be able to insist as the father to do that? Or am I supposed to just sit there and say, well, because you don't want to have it, you should be allowed to kill it inside you when you couldn't kill it outside of you, because if it was born prematurely, you couldn't decide to kill it. So why should that little bit of space between your body on the inside and your body on the outside make a difference? I mean,
as a liberal, I'd argue that no, you don't. That's not your decision to make.
Well, but why not?
And then you can say that's.
But as a liberal, why not? That's my question here. Why not? What's the difference?
Because it's not. I mean, the argument is bodily autonomy.
Okay, so we're going with bodily autonomy. We're going with that, right? So it's a woman's body. There's a baby inside the woman's body. The woman is saying, I don't want to have to carry this body inside me anymore. It's a parasite. I don't want this thing inside me anymore. Right? Why can't I then say, as the father of that child, okay, let's just assume, for the sake of what I'm asking you, the child is at a point where the heart's beating and it's viable outside of the womb. Let's assume that for the point of what I'm asking you. Why shouldn't I be able to say, because it's your body and you want the baby removed from you, that we will attempt to remove the baby from you in a way that the baby survives?
So the argument
to being forced to kill the baby because the baby is inside.
So the argument would be that part of bodily autonomy, because once that baby's born, that woman is legally responsible to.
No, that's a different argument, Rick. Don't change the goalpost on me, my friend.
But I'm saying that would be what the further argument would be.
That's a further argument, yes, and that's a totally different issue. We can argue about parental responsibility after the child is born later. The question here is about if the statement is the woman should not be forced to carry a baby that the woman doesn't want to carry. My question is, why shouldn't they be able to say, okay, we will remove this baby from you. We'll perform.
So I would argue that you're getting into increasingly, I don't know, tortured hypothetical. It's like, let's say on Star Trek, there's a problem with the transporter, and when it transports you, it doesn't get rid of the copy of you at the origin. So now there are two identical copies of you, and which one of those gets to live? And it's like that's a completely. It's like you can abortion and life are sufficiently involved that like you can make hypotheticals.
With respect, I think these are separate issues, right? So they're trying to, in the law, they're trying to make a determination about when life begins and when it doesn't, right? And one of the things that they're trying to talk about, for example, is the heartbeat rule. Now, we know that if we start talking about mid to late term abortions, that oftentimes these babies are born at a time when, I'll phrase that, these babies are aborted at a time when other babies at the same age have been born premature and have survived. All I'm asking is, without going into all these abstract things, is if we use an example where the baby has the potential to be able to survive outside of the womb on its own, if the argument is that a woman should be able to choose what happens to and with her body, shouldn't the argument be that the pregnancy can be terminated, and if the child can survive, then good luck to the child, and if the child does not survive as a result of that extraction or that premature birth, then so be it. What's the moral argument against that if the position is that women should have total autonomy over their bodies?
Well, I mean, I'm not, I'm not required to be consistent about this, and neither side is.
Neither am I, so fair enough.
Neither side is consistent. I will say that the biggest abortionist in the world is frickin' God, who kills half of all unborn babies.
I think it's more than that. I think it's 75%, but I won't blame.
It's some huge amount, and it's and I find the whole abortion thing very frustrating because this has been an issue for 2,000 years, and we still haven't solved it. And we're about to move into a science fictional future where there will be all these entities who are just as conscious as people are, and we haven't even figured out, and it'll lead to all sorts of conundrums. Can you marry your sex robot? She's fully capable of thought. Is the billionaire who's replaced 80% of his brain?
I'm gonna pop to the other show. I'll just simply say this to you, Rick. I think that women and men both have a vested interest in this, and I don't think anyone's position will be consistent. But I will certainly say, as much as I love and adore and respect your country, that the way that the progressive left and the ultra-conservative right break down this issue and every other issue into these black and white extreme sides, I think misses the nuances of what it is to be human. And I really wish that they would have.
America has no tolerance for nuances. Half of the population doesn't pay attention, and it's felt by the people who do the messaging that only simple, absolutist messaging gets through to the people who are distracted. I mean, I got hit.
Which is a sad reflection of society. But my friend, I have to go to Sasha's. So I'll love you and leave you, Rick. I'm going to send you an email because I want to talk to you about a couple of things.
Okay.
So I'll send you an email during the week.
All right.
Just really quickly, we are going to wrap up and everything, but I do agree with what you said, because even Jacoby was bringing some of those things up, because he was talking about each birth is a threat to a woman's life, therefore women should have the final say. And he was also saying that in this argument, you are asking for female mutilation. And I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, but that can sometimes be conversations around extreme uses of terminology and all along those lines. And sometimes that can happen in some of these debates as well. So I think I see the point that he was making, but I also can see where that can be problematic if you are coming from the pro-abortion side as well as the anti-abortion side as well.
Each side has good arguments and terrible arguments. Like a bad argument from the anti-abortion side is that pro-abortion people want to be able to kill a perfectly fine baby up until the moment of birth and sometimes after. And that's just a BS argument, but very effective among certain people.
I mean, one of the things that I've seen sometimes is, to what you said, sometimes we go for the extreme looks and everything, because even here in North Carolina, and I consider myself pro-choice and all along those lines, but I do remember seeing some of the signs that you would see on billboards of mutilated babies and mutilated fetuses, and no matter what your stance is, even if you are pro-choice, they will definitely reek at your emotional strings and everything. And that's the reason they put them up there. But yeah, and sometimes they were forced to take them down, but it can be very it's pulling at your heartstrings. That's what I was looking for and everything. But
nobody wants to see like a baby cut into pieces.
Right. And that's what a lot of times those posters are, and they can very much be shocking, to say the least. So that's part of the reason of them doing it, is to shock you into agreeing with their point of view, whether you agree with it or not and everything. But I was going to ask you, Teasley, and I was going to ask you, Jacoby, as well, and I'm getting ready to get on out of here, and I got to go back and finish managing the show that he was just talking about. But just really quickly, is we were talking about censorship at the beginning, and I think both you and Jacoby at one point had barking dogs. So I need to know whether we're going to start censoring the barking dogs, because maybe the dogs need to be censored as well.
When my wife comes home, the dogs go crazy. I also have we're under the flight path for Burbank Airport, so you'll hear planes, flying through my screen, and also the heater is really loud in our house, so I have to turn off the heat to do the show.
So we might have to censor those dogs, both yours and Jacoby's, and they might. Oh, and even the owner or one of the owners. I know Nick has a dog because I've actually met.
Yeah, Jacoby has a kid who gets in there.
Yeah. So we might have to do a censorship that way as well. And then the other thing I was going to bring up that I didn't bring up, but I'll mention it here, and then we can maybe make it part of the conversation tomorrow or on Thursday. Is I saw this great commercial, and it was about social media, but it was a king, I think, in an African nation. And it was one of their traditions to have the woman shine the sword. I think it's before like a wedding and all along those lines. And there were some people that were taking offense at that because it was from a different culture. There were some women that are like, how come she's got to be submissive and shine the sword? Isn't she putting her life at risk because she might get her head cut off and all along those lines? And even me and Shaquille have talked about different cultures and how they have different norms than what we are here. But when I looked at it on Instagram, the majority of the comments were people giving pushback because it wasn't westernized. So a lot of the Western people were taking offense at the fact that she was following the traditions of that particular nation. And it looked like it was either a Middle Eastern or an African nation.
Well, there's a certain school of thought that you don't want an American woman because she is less subservient than women from other cultures.
Right.
So
and
there's a whole mail order bride scam that's kind of based on that. Guys who can't get girlfriends in America can often be tricked into thinking that they are courting somebody in Russia.
Right.
And usually it's just to get their money.
That's totally it. But on that note, we're going to get out of here, but I might bring it up to Shaquille later. But it's been real. And as always, fun talking to you. And we'll catch you on the flip side.
See you this afternoon.
Yep, definitely.
Bye.
Bye.